Who holds the real power in a kingdom, the man with the crown or the men with the swords? For centuries, this question was the heart of a constant, dangerous power struggle between kings and their powerful nobles. A king's army was not his own. It belonged to his lords. But what if a king decided he was tired of begging for loyalty? What if he orchestrated a quiet, brilliant plot to make his own nobles obsolete? This is the story of that plot. It is the story of how kings created their own armies and, in doing so, signed the political death warrant for the age of the knight. Part 1. The King's Dilemma. The feudal bargain. The medieval kingdom was not a modern nation-state. It was a patchwork of territories controlled by powerful dukes, earls, and barons, all bound to the king by a fragile web of oaths. The king was often merely the first among equals. His military power was entirely dependent on the willingness of these great lords to answer his call to banners. This was the king's great dilemma. The very men he needed to defend his kingdom were also his greatest political rivals. A powerful duke could and often did rebel against the crown, taking his formidable army of knights with him. The king was forced to fight his own subjects, with other subjects never sure of who was truly loyal. The feudal system was a constant balancing act, a political headache. Kings knew that to achieve absolute power, to forge a true nation under their command, they first had to break the military monopoly held by the nobility. They needed an army that belonged not to the lords, but to the crown itself. Part 2. The new model. The standing army. The solution was a radical idea, one that had not been seen in Europe on a grand scale since the fall of the Roman Empire: a standing army. A standing army is a permanent professional military force maintained by the state in times of both peace and war. Its soldiers are not part-time warriors who are also farmers or lords. They are full-time professionals whose only job is to train and fight. Most importantly, their loyalty is not to a local lord who gave them land. Their loyalty is to the state and the king who pays their wages. This was the revolutionary concept. An army loyal to a paycheck, not to a feudal oath. By creating a standing army, a king could bypass his nobles entirely. He would have a force of disciplined soldiers ready to be deployed at a moment's notice, who answered only to him. It was the ultimate tool for consolidating power, but it came with a colossal price tag. How could a king afford such a thing? Part 3. The financial revolution. The power of taxation. To fund his new army, the king needed a direct, reliable stream of cash. This required a fundamental rewiring of the kingdom's economy, a move that would strike at the very heart of the nobles' power. Traditionally, kings received their income from their own royal lands and from customary feudal fees. To raise extra money for a war, they often had to ask their nobles for it, a process filled with political negotiation. But ambitious monarchs like Charles VII of France began to change the game. They sought the power to levy direct national taxes on the entire population, bypassing the lords. They taxed trade, they taxed land, they taxed salt. This tax money flowed directly into the royal treasury. This created a powerful new loop. The king would use this tax revenue to hire professional soldiers for his standing army. This professional army was far more effective than the old feudal levy, allowing the king to win more wars, conquer more territory, and thus levy even more taxes. The nobles were being written out of the equation, but the final, most brilliant move in this political chess game was how the kings dealt with the nobles' own military obligations. This strategy was nothing short of a political masterstroke. Part 4. The masterstroke, paying for their own demise. Here is the political plot in its full brutal genius. Kings began to formalize the practice of scutage, or shield money. This allowed a noble to pay a special tax to the king instead of providing his required military service. On the surface, this seemed like a win for everyone. The noble, who often found warfare increasingly expensive and dangerous, was happy to pay a fee to stay home. And the king, who found the feudal knights increasingly unreliable, was happy to take the cash. But here is the masterstroke. The king took the tax money paid by the nobles and used it to hire professional, loyal soldiers who were better than the nobles' own knights. In essence, the nobility was now paying the king to create an army that would make their own military power completely irrelevant. They were forced to finance their own obsolescence. The creation of the Compagnie d'Ordonnance by Charles VII of France in 1445 is the textbook example. It was the first standing army in Western Europe, funded by a new national tax called the tille. With this army, Charles VII finally drove the English out of France, ending the 100 Years' War. He proved that a centralized, state-funded army was superior. The political power of the armored knight and the lord who commanded him was broken forever. So the knight was not just outfought by new weapons or outpriced by a new economy. He was outmaneuvered in a grand political game. The very structure that gave him power, the feudal system, was dismantled from within by clever and ambitious kings. The shift from a feudal levy to a standing army was one of the most important turning points in European history. It was the birth of the modern nation-state with a centralized government and a monopoly on violence. In this new world, the knight, a decentralized, semi-independent warrior lord, had no place. He was a relic of a bygone political system. This story of political intrigue and the consolidation of power is another crucial chapter in the knight's decline. If you find these hidden political histories fascinating, show your support by hitting the like button. And to witness the final cultural death of this once great icon, subscribe to The Knight's Journey and ring the notification bell, because history is a relentless chess game. And when the rules change, even the most powerful pieces can be swept from the board.